Evelyn Harper, a 72-year-old retired federal judge, sat behind the wheel of her weathered blue Cadillac, the leather seats creaking under her slight frame. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Macon, Georgia's quiet South Side Avenue, where the air smelled of magnolias and dust. She was on her way back from Oakwood Cemetery, where she'd placed a single white rose on her husband Samuel's grave, a ritual she'd kept every June 24 since his death from cancer 8 years ago. Samuel, her anchor through decades of legal battles, had always believed in her fight for justice, a fight born from her childhood in Atlanta's segregated neighborhoods. Her father, a World War II veteran, had been handcuffed for simply standing too long on a street corner, a memory that fueled her rise to the federal bench, where she'd handed down rulings that reshaped civil rights law. The silence in the car wasn't heavy with grief but steady with purpose. Evelyn had faced courtrooms packed with skeptics, media storms questioning her credentials, and the weight of a nation watching her sign landmark decisions. She'd learned to carry herself with precision, hands at 10 and 2, eyes scanning the road, every move deliberate. But as she eased through a green light at the intersection of South Side and Vine, a sharp siren pierced the quiet. Red and blue lights flashed in her rearview mirror, a signal that demanded compliance without explanation. Evelyn's heart didn't race. She'd taught constitutional law at Southwell Law School, mentored young attorneys, and heard countless stories of police overreach. She knew the law could bend in the hands of those who saw her only as an elderly black woman. Signaling calmly, she pulled to the curb, turned off the engine, and placed her hands on the wheel, her posture as composed as it had been on the bench. The patrol car door opened, and Officer James Callahan stepped out, white, broad-shouldered, his cropped hair fresh from the academy, his stride radiating unchallenged authority. His sunglasses hid his eyes, but his voice carried a sneer. "License and registration, old lady," he barked, no greeting, no reason, just a command that stripped away dignity. "Good afternoon, officer," Evelyn replied, her voice even, trained by years of courtroom decorum. "May I ask why I've been stopped?" Callahan's frown deepened, his tone sharp. "I said papers. No questions." Evelyn knew she hadn't broken any laws, she'd checked her speed, stopped fully at the light, but she also knew arguing now was futile. She reached for her purse, slow and deliberate, her arthritis making her fingers stiff. "I have arthritis, officer. I move slowly. I'm also a retired federal judge." Callahan laughed, a harsh sound that echoed across the empty street. "A judge?" "Sure, and I'm the governor." "Out of the car, now." His hand gripped his holster, and before Evelyn could respond, he yanked the door open and grabbed her shoulder. Pain flared through her joints as he pulled her out, forcing her against the hot hood of the Cadillac. The metal burned against her palms, but she didn't flinch. She'd faced worse, colleagues who'd dismissed her, systems that tried to erase her, but this was different. This was raw, personal, a violation meant to break her. "You ran a red light," Callahan lied, his voice flat, rehearsed. "And I smell marijuana." There was no marijuana, no evidence, just his word against hers. Evelyn's eyes stayed steady, her voice calm. "There's a federal ID in my wallet, officer. It has a verification code. Please check it." He scoffed, flipping open her wallet and glancing at the laminated card. "Fake ID. Nice try, Grandma." He shoved the wallet into his pocket, the steel clink of handcuffs following. "Hands behind your back. You're under arrest for impersonating a federal official." The cuffs bit into her wrists, the cold metal pressing against swollen joints. Evelyn's shoulder throbbed, but she didn't resist, not out of fear, but because she knew resistance could turn deadly. Across the street, a young woman with a phone began recording, her hands trembling but steady. Callahan noticed, his voice growing louder, performative. "She's resisting an officer," he shouted, shoving Evelyn toward the patrol car. Her forehead grazed the doorframe, a sharp sting spreading as blood trickled down her temple. She didn't cry out. She locked eyes with Callahan, her gaze carrying the weight of every courtroom she'd ever commanded. "You will be held accountable," she said, not a threat but a promise. In that moment, Evelyn Harper wasn't just a retired judge. She was a woman who'd fought her whole life to prove her worth, who'd buried her husband but not her resolve, who'd seen her father humiliated and vowed never to bow to the same injustice. As the patrol car door slammed shut, she sat in silence, not defeated but calculating. The truth was in her wallet, her name, her legacy. And soon, it would be a reckoning Callahan couldn't imagine. Evelyn Harper sat in the back of the patrol car, her wrists aching from the tight cuffs, the faint metallic taste of blood lingering on her lips. The Macon County Police Station loomed ahead, its gray concrete walls stark against the fading daylight. She didn't speak, didn't plead, silence was her shield, a lesson learned from decades on the bench. Officer Callahan's boots crunched on the gravel as he opened the door, barking, "Out, now." Evelyn moved slowly, her knees stiff, her balance unsteady from the pain in her shoulder. She faltered, and Callahan's baton twitched, as if eager for an excuse. But she steadied herself, her eyes meeting his with a quiet defiance that made him pause. Inside the station, the intake process was a blur of indifference. A bored officer snapped her photo, the flash catching the dried blood on her temple. "Name?" he asked, barely looking up. "Evelyn Harper, retired federal judge," she replied, her voice steady, cutting through the room's hum. The officer smirked, jotting something down. "Sure, lady. You'll get a nurse when it's your turn." They led her to a solitary cell, the white fluorescent light harsh against her eyes, the metal bench cold against her aching back. She requested her blood pressure medication, but the response was a shrug. "Not special here," the officer said, slamming the door. Alone, Evelyn leaned against the wall, her mind racing not with fear but with clarity. She'd seen this system before, not from a cell, but from the bench, where she'd heard stories of dismissed complaints and erased identities. Her father's arrest decades ago flashed in her mind, a proud man humiliated for existing in the wrong place. She'd sworn to fight that injustice, and now it had come for her. But she wasn't powerless. She had a name, a legacy, and a phone call she could make. When the cell door opened hours later, a young officer, Maria Gonzalez, stepped in. Her dark eyes flicked to Evelyn's bruised temple, her expression hesitant but not cruel. "Ma'am," she said softly, her Houston accent warm, "I brought water and aspirin." Evelyn studied her name tag, sensing a flicker of unease. Maria's uncle, an activist, had been harassed by police in her hometown, pushing her to join the force to change it from within. But 3 months on the job had shown her a system that rewarded silence. "I know who you are," Maria whispered, glancing at the door. "My uncle's a clerk at the district court. He has your photo in his office. I made a call, outside the system. They're coming." Evelyn nodded, her face unreadable but grateful. "Be careful, officer. Truth comes at a cost here." Maria's lips pressed tight, her resolve hardening. She left without another word, her steps quiet but deliberate. Evelyn sipped the water, the aspirin easing the throb in her head. Maria's act was small, but it was a crack in the system's armor, a crack Evelyn knew how to widen. By morning, the station was in chaos. A call from the office of the Chief Justice had sent officers scrambling, pulling logs, checking cameras. Sheriff Robert Langston, a man who'd built his career on law and order, arrived, his face pale as he read Evelyn's file. Her release was immediate, signed with a trembling hand. "A misunderstanding, Mrs. Harper," he stammered, offering a ride she declined. She walked out, her gray coat stained but her head high, demanding all records be preserved, every camera feed, every report. Back home, Evelyn didn't rest. She called Daniel Carter, a 38-year-old civil rights attorney she'd mentored at Southwell. Daniel, biracial and driven by his brother's wrongful incarceration, had lost a major case recently, leaving him questioning his worth. "Evelyn, you okay?" he asked, voice thick with concern. "Not yet," she replied. "But we're going to make this right. Meet me tomorrow. Bring your files." As she hung up, Evelyn looked at Samuel's photo on her mantel, his smile a reminder of why she fought. This wasn't just about her. It was about every name erased by a system that thought it could hide its sins. The small office Daniel Carter rented in downtown Macon smelled of old coffee and ink, its walls lined with legal books and faded case files. Evelyn sat at a worn wooden desk, her silver hair catching the dim light of a single lamp. Across from her, Daniel hunched over a laptop, his fingers flying across the keys as he accessed Macon County's public records database. The bruise on Evelyn's temple had darkened, but her eyes were sharp, scanning a stack of complaints dismissed over the past decade. "This isn't just one bad stop," she said, her voice low but firm. "It's a pattern." Daniel nodded, his jaw tight. His brother's wrongful arrest at 17 had driven him to law school, but a recent case loss had left him feeling powerless. Working with Evelyn, his mentor, was a chance to reclaim his purpose. "Look at this," he said, turning the screen. A 2019 complaint from a man named Marcus Reed detailed being detained for suspicious behavior at a gas station. No charges, but his car was seized. The report was dismissed in 48 hours, signed by Sheriff Robert Langston. "Same signature on 60% of these," Daniel added, flipping through more files. Evelyn's fingers traced the names: Marcus, Clara Thompson, Luther Green. Each file told a story of dismissed dignity, arrests without cause, assets taken without trial. Clara, a 65-year-old retired teacher, lost her home after a false loitering charge. Her complaint, filed in 2020, was marked unverifiable identity. Evelyn's heart tightened, remembering her father's arrest, the way his pride was stripped away. "They're not just targeting people," she said. "They're targeting those they think won't be missed." The door creaked open, and Maria Gonzalez stepped in, her police uniform traded for a plain jacket. Her face was pale, her hands clutching a USB drive. "I got these from the station's internal server," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "Recordings from Langston's briefings. He talks about managing complaints and clearing files. It's not just him." Mayor Thornton's name comes up. Maria's uncle had faced police harassment for his activism, and her guilt over staying silent during similar incidents pushed her to act. "I could lose my badge for this," she added, but her eyes held no regret. Evelyn took the drive, her expression steady. "You're not alone, Maria. We're building something bigger than any badge." They played the first recording, Langston's voice, cold and precise, saying, "Push the Harper file to the back. No audit trail." Another clip mentioned Thornton's funding, hinting at a financial scheme. Daniel's eyes widened. "This ties the sheriff to the mayor. And look here," he pulled up a budget record showing millions funneled to Hawkstone Correctional, a private prison linked to Thornton's brother-in-law. As the night wore on, the office became a war room. Evelyn mapped connections on a whiteboard: Callahan's arrests, Langston's cover-ups, Thornton's contracts. Each link was a thread in a web of corruption, one she'd seen glimpses of in her judicial career but never so clearly. Daniel, reinvigorated, cross-referenced complaints with asset seizure records, finding 80% of seized property, cars, cash, homes, came from Black and Latino residents, despite their small population share. "This isn't justice," he said, voice shaking. "It's profit." Evelyn stood, her arthritis flaring but her resolve unshaken. She thought of Samuel, who'd always said, "Truth is heavy, but it's the only thing worth carrying." She looked at Daniel and Maria, two young allies risking everything. "We're not just fighting for me," she said. "We're fighting for every name in those files. Tomorrow, we start listening to their stories." The room fell silent, not with fear, but with the weight of a truth that could no longer be ignored. The Mount Zion Church's back room was bathed in soft light from a stained glass window, casting amber and purple streaks across a long wooden table. Evelyn Harper sat at one end, her hands folded, listening as Clara Thompson, 65, spoke in a trembling but resolute voice. "They took my home," Clara said, her eyes fixed on the table. "Said I was loitering outside my own yard. Charged me, seized my property, and when I complained, they said my ID didn't check out." Clara, a retired teacher who'd spent her life educating Macon's children, had been forced to live with her sister after the loss. Her story mirrored Evelyn's father's, igniting a fire in her chest. Next to Clara sat Marcus Reed, 28, his hands clenched. "I was arrested driving home from work," he said. "They said I looked suspicious. Kept me 48 hours, no doctor, even though my wife was pregnant. She lost our baby in that cell. They called it a complication." His voice cracked, but he didn't look away. Evelyn felt Samuel's absence keenly, his memory urging her to keep going for those who'd lost everything. She didn't interrupt, letting each word sink into the room's quiet. Daniel Carter scribbled notes, his face tight with anger. His brother's wrongful conviction had taught him the system's cruelty, but hearing it from Clara and Marcus made it personal again. "How many more?" he muttered, flipping through a stack of complaints. Maria Gonzalez, sitting quietly, nodded. Her decision to leak recordings had come from seeing families like hers torn apart by police in Houston. "I've seen this too many times," she said softly. "People like us, we're just numbers to them." Evelyn stood, her charcoal coat brushing the floor. "You're not numbers," she said, her voice steady as a gavel. "You're evidence. Your stories are the truth they tried to bury." She handed out pens and paper, asking for sworn affidavits. Clara hesitated, fear flickering in her eyes. She'd heard of neighbors harassed after speaking out, but Evelyn's calm resolve steadied her. "I've been where you are," Evelyn said. "They called me a fraud, too. But we're stronger together." By the end of the night, 10 affidavits were signed, each detailing arrests without cause, seized assets, and dismissed complaints. Marcus brought a faded hospital bill showing his wife's untreated condition in custody. Clara had a photo of her home's broken door from a warrantless raid. Others shared stories: an elderly man beaten for resisting, a mechanic whose savings were seized without explanation. Each testimony built a mosaic of systemic abuse, with Sheriff Langston's and Mayor Thornton's names recurring. Daniel organized the files, his doubt giving way to purpose. "This is enough for a class action suit," he said, looking at Evelyn. "But we need more, witnesses, documents, anything to tie it to Thornton's money." Maria handed over another USB drive. "This has emails from Langston's office to Hawkstone Correctional," she said. "They talk about the detention quotas to secure funding." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. She'd seen corruption before, but this was a machine, profiting off pain, protected by power. As they left the church, Evelyn paused at the door, the weight of the stories settling into her bones. She thought of her father, his pride broken by a system that saw him as less. "We're not just fighting for us," she told Daniel and Maria. "We're fighting for everyone they tried to erase." Outside, the Macon night was quiet, but in that small room, a spark had ignited, a collective voice that would soon demand to be heard. Evelyn Harper's small Macon home was silent, save for the faint hum of her security system. It was 3 a.m. when the alarm blared for 3 seconds before cutting off abruptly. She woke, heart steady but senses sharp, and checked the porch camera feed, blank, wiped clean. In the morning, she found the back door latch bent, a single file missing from her cabinet, a dossier on Hawkstone Correctional's funding ties to Mayor Thornton. Nothing else was taken, a deliberate message. Evelyn called the police, but the report was curt: no forced entry, no loss. She didn't argue. She'd seen this in her judicial days, subtle intimidation to silence the truth. At Daniel Carter's office, the air was thick with tension. Daniel, his arms still sore from a recent accident in his garage, a masked man with a pipe who smashed his laptop and left, showed Evelyn a new email. "Your fight's getting loud. Quiet down, or your witnesses won't be next time." His hands shook, not from fear but fury. His brother's incarceration had taught him the system's ruthlessness, but this was personal. "They're scared," he said. "We're hitting something big." Maria Gonzalez arrived, her face drawn. "Clara Thompson got a call last night," she said. "Someone told her to stop talking or lose more than a house." Maria's own risk weighed heavy. Her uncle had warned her about crossing the police, but her guilt over past silence pushed her forward. "I pulled more files," she added, handing Evelyn a drive with budget records showing millions funneled to Hawkstone, signed by Thornton's allies. "They're not just covering up. They're profiting." Evelyn's arthritis flared as she gripped the drive, but her mind was clear. She thought of Samuel, who'd faced threats for his union work but never backed down. "They think fear will stop us," she said. "But fear only works if you're alone." She and Daniel cross-referenced the new records, finding a pattern. 90% of asset seizures targeted Black and Latino residents, funding detention centers linked to Thornton's brother-in-law. Each dollar was a wound, each seizure a life disrupted. That evening, Clara called, her voice shaky. "They followed my grandson home from school," she said. "I want to keep going, Evelyn, but I'm scared." Evelyn's heart ached, remembering her father's fear after his arrest. "You're not alone, Clara," she said. "We'll protect you." She contacted a federal attorney friend, requesting witness protection protocols. Daniel, reinvigorated, filed a motion to preserve all evidence, citing intimidation. As night fell, Evelyn stood by her window, the Macon skyline dim under a heavy sky. The system was fighting back, not with arguments but with shadows, erased files, broken latches, veiled threats. But she'd faced shadows before, in courtrooms and in her childhood. She thought of Samuel's words, "Truth doesn't bend, even when they try to break you." With Daniel's determination and Maria's courage, Evelyn knew they were building something unstoppable, a case that would expose not just one officer, but a machine that thrived on silence. The rented conference room in Macon's independent law office was cramped, its walls covered with diagrams linking Officer Callahan to Sheriff Langston and Mayor Thornton. Evelyn Harper sat at the head of a table cluttered with files, her eyes scanning a spreadsheet of asset seizures. Daniel Carter, his arm in a sling from the garage attack, typed furiously, cross-referencing complaints with Maria Gonzalez's leaked recordings. "This is it," Daniel said, pointing to a line in an email from Langston to Hawkstone Correctional, "Maintain detention quotas for Q3 funding." The words were cold, clinical, a blueprint for profit over justice. Evelyn's hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what they'd uncovered. Her father's arrest had taught her the system could crush without remorse, but seeing it laid bare, names, dates, dollars, was different. "This isn't just misconduct," she said. "It's a criminal enterprise." She thought of Samuel, who'd fought for workers' rights against similar corruption. His memory steadied her, a reminder that truth was worth the cost. Maria, her police badge tucked away, added another file. "This is from a crisis meeting," she said. "Langston told the team to bury Harper's case like the others." Her voice wavered, her uncle's warnings about police retaliation echoing in her mind. But her choice to act, driven by guilt over past silence, gave her strength. "There's more," she said. "Emails tying Thornton to Hawkstone's contracts. His brother-in-law owns 20% of the company." Daniel's eyes lit up, his doubt replaced by purpose. "This fits RICO," he said. "Structured group, repeated crimes, profit motive." He'd lost a case before, but this time, with Evelyn's guidance, he felt unstoppable. They compiled affidavits from Clara, Marcus, and others, each story a brick in their case. Clara's lost home, Marcus's lost child, an elderly man's broken wrist, all linked to a system that targeted the vulnerable for profit. Evelyn stood, her arthritis a dull ache, and pointed to the diagram. Callahan assaulted me because he knew he'd walk free. Langston covered it up because he's tied to Thornton's money. And Hawkstone's not a prison, it's a business. Her voice was calm but heavy, each word a gavel strike. She recalled her judicial rulings, forcing systems to change. This was bigger, a chance to dismantle a machine that preyed on her community. They worked late, organizing evidence for a federal RICO filing. Daniel drafted the petition, Maria verified the recording's authenticity, and Evelyn reviewed every detail, her legal mind sharp despite the pain in her joints. By dawn, they had a case: Callahan's violence, Langston's cover-ups, Thornton's profits, all backed by witness testimonies and financial records. "We're ready," Evelyn said, looking at her team. "But this is just the start. They'll fight harder now." Outside, Macon's streets were quiet, but in that room, a storm was brewing. Evelyn thought of her father, his dignity stolen, and of Samuel, who'd believed in her fight. "We're not just fighting for us," she told Daniel and Maria. "We're fighting for every name they tried to erase." The case was ready, and with it, a truth that would shake Macon County to its core. The federal courtroom in Atlanta was a stark contrast to Macon's humid streets, its polished wood and high ceilings echoing with the weight of justice. Evelyn Harper sat at the plaintiff's table, her gray suit simple but commanding, the faint bruise on her temple a silent testament to her ordeal. At 72, she carried the poise of a retired federal judge, her silver hair neatly tied back, her eyes sharp as they scanned the room. Daniel Carter sat beside her, his arms still in a sling, his face set with determination. Maria Gonzalez, in civilian clothes, sat in the gallery, her presence a quiet act of defiance. The defense table was a fortress of laptops and paper stacks, 7 lawyers representing Macon County, Sheriff Langston, Mayor Thornton, and Hawkstone Correctional. Their lead counsel, a slick attorney with a practiced smile, opened with a challenge to the RICO filing, claiming insufficient evidence of a criminal enterprise. Evelyn's heart stayed steady, she'd faced such tactics before, in courtrooms where her rulings forced change. She thought of her father, humiliated by police, and Samuel, whose belief in her never wavered. This wasn't just her fight, it was theirs. When Evelyn took the stand, the room fell silent. Her voice was calm, deliberate, each word carrying the authority of decades on the bench. "I was pulled over on Southside Avenue," she began, "not for a crime, but because Officer Callahan saw an elderly black woman and assumed I didn't belong. He mocked my federal ID, called it fake, and struck me, leaving blood on my temple." She paused, letting the weight settle. "But this isn't about me. It's about Clara Thompson, who lost her home. Marcus Reed, who lost his child. Countless others whose names were erased." She laid out the evidence, Maria's recordings of Langston ordering cover-ups, budget records tying Thornton to Hawkstone's profits, affidavits from victims. The defense tried to interrupt, citing procedural errors, but Evelyn's clarity cut through. "This system didn't fail," she said, her gaze locking on the judges. "It was designed to target, detain, and profit from the vulnerable." Daniel followed, presenting financial records showing millions funneled through asset seizures, his voice steady despite his recent attack. Maria's testimony, delivered with quiet resolve, confirmed the recording's authenticity, her uncle's activism fueling her courage. The gallery stirred as Clara and Marcus stood, holding photos and hospital bills, their faces resolute. A former Hawkstone employee slipped Daniel a memo detailing detention quotas, whispering, "I couldn't stay silent anymore." The defense's confidence wavered, their attorney scribbling furiously, sweat beading on their foreheads. Evelyn's testimony wasn't just evidence, it was a reckoning, pulling back the curtain on a system that thrived on silence. As the session ended, Evelyn stepped down, her arthritis flaring but her spirit unbroken. She looked at Daniel and Maria, their eyes reflecting her own resolve. She thought of Samuel's words, "Truth is a heavy load, but it carries you forward." The courtroom battle wasn't over, but the truth was now a force no one could ignore, and Evelyn Harper was its unwavering bearer. The Atlanta federal courthouse buzzed with tension as the hearing resumed, the air thick with anticipation. Evelyn Harper sat in the public gallery, her charcoal coat folded neatly in her lap, her presence a quiet force. She'd recused herself from the Supreme Court bench to ensure the trial's impartiality, a choice that weighed heavily but felt right. Her father's wrongful arrest and Samuel's unwavering support had taught her justice wasn't about power, it was about truth. Daniel Carter, his arm healing, stood at the plaintiff's table, presenting new evidence, a hard drive from Maria Gonzalez with 30 audio clips of Sheriff Langston's cover-up orders. The defense, rattled by the mounting evidence, tried to pivot, claiming the recordings were out of context. But Maria's testimony, delivered with a steady voice, crushed their argument. "I heard Langston say, 'Bury Harper's file, no trace,'" she said, her Houston roots grounding her resolve. "I recorded it because I couldn't let another family suffer like my uncles did." The gallery erupted in murmurs as a former budget clerk stood, handing Daniel an email from Mayor Thornton's office, "Secure Hawkstone funding by Q3. Keep complaints quiet." The room stilled, the defense's laptops untouched. Daniel's voice grew stronger, his doubt replaced by purpose. "This isn't one officer's mistake," he said, pointing to the diagram linking Callahan, Langston, and Thornton. "It's a machine, arrests for profit, complaints buried, witnesses silenced." He presented budget records showing $4 million in seized assets funneled to Hawkstone, Thornton's brother-in-law's company. The judges leaned forward, their faces stern, as Clara Thompson and Marcus Reed stood, their affidavits in hand, their pain now evidence. Outside, Macon streets buzzed with news vans and protesters, the hashtag Justice for Evelyn trending nationwide. Social media shared clips of Maria's recordings, igniting outrage. Evelyn stayed calm, her eyes on the witnesses, remembering her father's humiliation and Samuel's belief in her. The system was cracking, not from her alone, but from the collective weight of voices long ignored. A former Hawkstone employee slipped Daniel another file, detailing illegal detention quotas, whispering, "You're doing what I couldn't." As the day ended, the defense's lead attorney faltered, his arguments thin against the flood of evidence. Langston and Thornton, absent but named, faced federal subpoenas. Evelyn stood, nodding to Clara and Marcus, her heart heavy with their shared pain but lifted by their courage. "We're not done," she told Daniel and Maria outside the courthouse, the Atlanta skyline glowing behind them. "But they're running out of places to hide." The system wasn't just bending, it was breaking, and Evelyn Harper's truth was the wedge driving it apart. The Atlanta federal courthouse was packed, its gallery filled with faces from Macon's overlooked corners, retired teachers, young parents, former detainees, all drawn by a shared hope. Evelyn Harper sat among them, her hands clasped, her eyes steady. She'd stepped aside from the Supreme Court bench, her recusal a testament to her belief that justice must be pure, untainted by personal stakes. Her father's arrest and Samuel's faith had shaped her, but this moment belonged to the community she'd empowered. Daniel Carter stood at the plaintiff's table, his voice clear, presenting the final RICO evidence, Maria Gonzalez's recordings, budget records, and 25 affidavits from victims like Clara Thompson and Marcus Reed. The defense, now desperate, tried to discredit the witnesses, calling Clara's story unreliable and Marcus's exaggerated. But their arguments crumbled as Maria took the stand, her voice unwavering. "I saw the system silence people like my uncle," she said, her Houston accent grounding her words. "Langston ordered us to erase complaints. Thornton's money kept it running." She played a clip of Langston saying, "Harper's case ends here. No records." The room gasped, the judges' faces hardening. Daniel followed, his arm sling gone, his confidence restored. "This isn't about one arrest," he said, pointing to a chart of Hawkstone's profits. "It's a criminal enterprise, Callahan's violence, Langston's cover-ups, Thornton's profits. He presented a new email from Thornton's office, approving $5 million for Hawkstone, signed by his brother-in-law. Clara stood, holding a photo of her seized home, her voice breaking but resolute. "They took my life's work," she said. Marcus added, "They took my child." Their pain filled the room, undeniable. The gallery stirred as more witnesses rose, a former clerk with budget memos, a Hawkstone guard with detention logs. Evelyn watched, her heart swelling with their courage, remembering Samuel's words, "Truth carries you forward." The defense's attorneys whispered frantically, their paper stacks useless against the flood of evidence. Outside, protesters chanted, news outlets broadcast Maria's clips, and #JusticeForEvelyn trended globally. The system's facade was gone, exposed by voices it had tried to erase. As the session closed, Evelyn met Clara's eyes, then Marcus's, nodding silently. She thought of her father, his dignity stolen, and felt a quiet triumph, not for herself, but for them. Daniel and Maria joined her outside, the Atlanta air cool against their faces. "We've got them," Daniel said, his doubt gone. Maria nodded, her guilt replaced by purpose. Evelyn looked at the courthouse, its lights glowing. "This isn't the end," she said. "It's the start of their reckoning." The truth was now a force, and Macon County's corrupt heart was laid bare. The Atlanta federal courthouse stood solemn under a gray morning sky, its halls quiet but heavy with history. Evelyn Harper sat in the public gallery, her charcoal coat folded over her arm, her silver hair catching the light. The Supreme Court's ruling was moments away, and the room held its breath. She'd recused herself from the bench, a choice rooted in her belief that justice must stand above personal gain. Her father's wrongful arrest and Samuel's unwavering support had taught her that truth was her legacy, not power. Beside her, Daniel Carter gripped a file, his injuries healed, his purpose renewed. Maria Gonzalez, now a civilian after resigning her badge, sat nearby, her courage a spark that had lit this fire. The Chief Justice, her voice steady, read the verdict. The court finds Macon County, its law enforcement, and administrative agencies guilty of systemic constitutional violations, racial profiling, unlawful seizures, and obstruction of justice. The words landed like a gavel, final and unshakable. Sheriff Robert Langston and Mayor Edward Thornton faced immediate arrest for orchestrating a criminal enterprise. Hawkstone Correctional's contracts were frozen, its records subpoenaed. The court ordered sweeping reforms, an independent oversight body, public access to arrest records, and reparations for victims like Clara Thompson and Marcus Reed. Evelyn didn't smile or cheer. She nodded to the bench, acknowledging the truth's victory. Clara, in the gallery, wiped tears, her home's loss now recognized. Marcus clutched his wife's hospital bill, his pain validated. The ruling wasn't just for them, it was for every nameless victim buried in Macon's files. Outside, protesters cheered, news cameras rolled, and #JusticeForEvelyn trended worldwide. Daniel whispered, "We did it." Maria added, "They couldn't hide anymore." Evelyn's heart swelled, not with pride, but with the weight of their shared fight. Later, at Oakwood Cemetery, Evelyn knelt by a weathered, nameless grave marked only, Case MD 4721, deceased in custody. She placed a copy of the ruling under a stone, alongside a wooden plaque reading, "You were seen. You are remembered." She thought of her father, his dignity stolen, and Samuel, who'd believed in her fight. This wasn't for them alone, but for every soul erased by a system that profited from silence. "Your truth lives," she whispered, her hand on the stone, a quiet promise to the forgotten. As she walked away, a group of students passed, their teacher pausing to read the plaque. "This changed Macon," she told them, her voice soft. Evelyn didn't turn back. Her fight, on paper, was over, but justice wasn't a verdict, it was a call to remember, to speak, to stand. She pulled her coat tight, the wind cool against her face, and walked on, knowing the truth she'd carried would light the way for others. To everyone who's followed this journey, thank you. You've walked with Evelyn through pain, courage, and triumph, seen a system exposed not by power, but by truth. If Evelyn's story moved you, share it. Hit the subscribe button and join us at Revenge Ties, where every story uncovers a fight for justice, a spark of hope, and a chance for change. Keep speaking your truth, and we'll meet you at the table where voices rise and systems fall.